Hey folks, how's it going? Realm Gaming here. Today we are discussing the Fire Mage. We're going to do a quick guide on the class. I'm going to give you a decent overview of them. We're going to go over rotation, strengths, weaknesses, secondary talents, all that good stuff. We'll get into, we'll try to get decently deep into the talent tree. We're not going to review absolutely everything, but we'll try to hit some of the main points. So with that being said, let's get started. So what even is Fire Mage? So Fire Mage is going to be a class that revolves around, obviously, fire spells, and they have a unique heating up and hot streak system. So the way that this works is whenever you score a critical strike, you become heating up. So then after you score a second critical strike, you will then be in this hot streak sort of system. So the way this hot streak system works is basically whenever you score 2 critical strikes in a row, you become in this hot streak, and that's going to make your next flame strike or pyroblast an instant cast and do double the ignite damage. And simply all ignite is ignite is actually our mastery, and this is a dot that pops onto the target whenever you hit them with one of your fire spells. And this is more specific towards like cleave situations, right, or area of effect situations. You want to have that ignite dot on as many targets as possible. We'll touch on that a bit more in the video. All right, so some of the strengths and weaknesses of Fire Mage. One that kind of comes to mind off the top of my head is typically Fire Mages are better as the key level gets higher, very similar to something like Balance Druid. They kind of have this sort of ramp with their Mastery Ignite, and you want to be able to spread to all those different targets that Ignite Mastery so that you can get damage taking on all these mobs. And it's not necessarily hard to spread, but it does take a little bit of setup time. And then not only that, you also have your hot streaks to play in. So first you got to set up Ignite, then you have to get into a hot streak where you can start casting some of these instant flame strikes and pyroblast. And that all takes a little bit of time, and typically trash dies so fast in lower keys that you're not going to really be able to feel your damage until you start pushing probably into like the 20 key range, right? And not going to go too much into combustion right now, but this is very strong for both single target and AoE. And this is going to be the main cooldown that you play around. We do have some talents that help further reduce the cooldown of combustion, which we will go into a little bit later. Just know at the start of this guide that combustion is something that you really want to focus on. And then Mage is just kind of baseline in general for all mages. They're very tanky to be a caster. They have, Alter Time, Ice Block, Cauterize, which is unique to Fire Mage. They have this Blazing Barrier, where you can also go into Mass Barrier as a talent, which isn't listed here. Then, of course, Fire Mage also has the best mobility out of all the Mage specs. This is to Scorch, which is castable while moving. Hot Streak allows instant cast of your spells, so of course you can use that while moving. Shimmer, which allows you to cast while using your blink spell. We'll get into that here in a little bit. And then Alter Time, which basically snaps you back to a previous state in time, basically doing a mini teleport of your character. So in the weaknesses, not a ton of talent variety. You're kind of stuck to specific specs. You also don't have much spread cleave if targets are separated. You can kind of work around that with your Mastery Ignite and Fire Blast if you're kind of really paying attention, but typically you're only going to be doing a bunch of damage to mobs that are stacked. So unlike something like, again, I'll just compare it to Balance Druid, where they have their Starfall procs going out, and they can do this huge spread cleave to anything that's within range. Fire Mage is kind of stuck to your green Flame Strike circle. So just something to think about going forward. The playstyle is a little bit technical. You do have to press your buttons in specific orders to be able to roll out those hot streaks. So it's very punishing if you're unable to get a hot streak going consistently. Not a ton of self-healing. We do have some healing through Cauterize, and there's also a little trick that I'll show you later where you can use Ice Block with your Cauterize to just keep some of that health that Cauterize regenerates. And then you also have Sun King's Blessing, which encourages frequent hard casting. And the reason for this is because this is going to make you focus more on getting these hot streaks. And we will, of course, go over this here shortly. All right, first major offensive cooldown we're going to talk about here is Meteor. This is just going to hurl a large fireball down on the ground, and it's going to spread your ignite to all the different targets in that area. This will do reduced damage beyond 8 targets, and it will leave a ground effect on the ground for any enemies that stand in that ground effect will take an additional ticking fire damage over time. We also have your main cooldown here, Combustion. This is going to give you 100% increased critical strike chance for a short duration, and this is going to be what you mainly play around in your rotation. Up next, we have Fire Blast, and with the talent builds that we're running, this is going to give us 3 charges of Fire Blast, and this is going to be very useful because it is a guaranteed critical strike. So what this means is whenever you get heating up, you can Fire Blast to guarantee a critical strike, meaning you will never lose your heating up proc, guaranteeing your hot streak. So very useful. You'll be weaving that in and out of your rotation, so something to keep in mind. Finally, we have Dragon's Breath here. It's going to be like an AoE interrupt. You're going to spit out fire through like a dragon spell, and it does a decent amount of damage. You're going to see a lot of value out of this with Alexstrasza's Fury, and you're going to see a lot of value out of this in Mythic Plus content because it does that AoE effect, right? So Alexstrasza's Fury is going to guarantee this to be a critical strike, so you can use it similar to Fire Blast for guaranteeing that critical strike when you're heating up to get you into a guaranteed hot streak. All right, then for defensive and utility cooldowns, we have a Mass Barrier, which is a talent on our class tree. This is going to place a Blazing Barrier on yourself and up to 4 party members. So this is definitely something you want to be running in Mythic Plus content. Blazing Barrier, you can see it down here in the bottom right. It's just a fire shield is really all it is, and it grants an absorb. This is really good for like bursting, for example. Whenever there's a whole bunch of AoE damage coming out ticking, you can pop that and you can absorb a lot of the effect, right? Or most of the effect. So that's really useful to have. We also have Ice Block, pretty much how we all remember it. It's going to encase you in a block of ice and make you immune to damage. So really strong to have in pretty much any content that you're doing. We have the iconic Time Warp as well, which is similar to like Bloodlust from Shamans. This is going to give you and your party a 40% haste buff. You can only use this once every 10 minutes. So a very powerful ability, but just make sure you're coordinating this with your group. We also take Temporal Warp as well with Time Warp, and I guess long story short of this ability, it allows you to use Time Warp twice in a row. So this means that you can Time Warp yourself and then Time Warp the group, and the effect stacks. So really important. This is why this is part of the reason why Fire Mage is so cooldown reliant, because they have so many buttons that they can press that really amplify the damage for a very short period of time, and you have to know exactly what buttons to press in that period of time to get the most out of your damage. We also have Mirror Image here. It simply is going to reduce your damage taken by 20%. Makes a few copies of yourself, like 3 additional copies, but the main thing is it reduces your damage taken by 20% for the duration of that effect. You have Greater Invisibility, which will reduce your damage taken by 60%. All right, then we also have Cauterize here. So this is sort of your cheat death ability. So anytime that you take a hit that would rather kill your character, you will instead instantly regenerate 30% life. But the downside of this is you will start to lose that life over time. So I think you have like a 6-second period, and then after that 6 seconds is up, you'll have burned through that 35% life, and then your character will die. So you can actually pair this with Ice Block to stop that burn effect, right? So let's say you take fatal damage, you go up to 35% health, and then you Ice Block, it's going to stop the burn effect completely, and you'll retain all of that 35% health. So just a little trick there, just in case you didn't already know it. And we already talked about Blazing Barrier. That's going to be your Fire Shield, your Absorb spell, and then you have Counter Spell as well, which is going to be our main interrupt that we use. All right, so let's talk about stat priority. This is going to be for both Mythic Plus and Raid. So one of the main questions is, why is haste such a main priority for us when everything we pretty much just talked about involves like combustion and critical strike. Well, haste is going to scale with combustion. So haste affects the global cooldown, and this allows for more casts within a combustion window. So combustion is already giving us 100% critical strike within this window. So to get the most value out of our combustion, we want to cast as many spells as we possibly can within that 12-second window for as many critical strikes as possible, right? They're all going to be critical strikes regardless. So we want to get as many spell cast out as possible. Haste is also important because it affects our ticks from our Mastery Ignite. The more haste you have, the more ticks you're going to get, the faster those ticks are going to happen. This also affects like Flame Strike, for example. We take a talent called Flame Patch, which puts an AoE ground effect below the Flame Patch. And this, of course, also scales with haste. You get more Flame Patch ticks. And if you get enough haste, you can actually stack your Flame Strikes to get multiple Flame Patches out on top of each other for a stacked Flame Patch effect. All right, now quickly talking about our tier set. Once again, thankfully our tier set doesn't change our rotation a whole bunch, but it does introduce a new effect here called Searing Rage. So Searing Rage here, just to read it out, when Power Blast and Flame Strike critically strike, you gain Searing Rage, increasing your crit strike damage by 4% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 20%. So again, this is just going to be like a buff to yourself, increasing your crit damage by 20%. Now, when you activate Combustion, this will increase the crit strike bonus of Searing Rage by 150% for 12 seconds. So basically, this effect will go from 20% to 50%. All right, these are our raid single target talents that have been suggested from Method's website. So feel free to pause the video here if you want to take a little bit longer look at this. I will have a link to the talents as well as an import in the description below. And then here is also from Method our AoE and Cleave talents that we'll be taking this season. All right, these will be the enchants that we are taking. Again, feel free to pause the video here. All these can be bought from the auction house. These will be the gems and consumables. All right, now let's quickly just talk about talents and abilities, right? We've kind of had a brief introduction to some of our major cooldowns and whatnot, the core set. So let's take a look at what Fire Mage even really is, right? So we have a Fireball ability. We're gonna hurl a Fireball at the target. We have a bigger Fireball, which is called Pyroblast. That's gonna be probably your main single target damage ability. We have an AoE ground effect called Flame Strike. We have a Scorch ability, which can be cast while moving. We have an instant cast ability here called Fire Blast, which will be a guaranteed critical strike. So it's really good when you're heating up to guarantee that hot streak proc. All right, so just to show you what that looks like, let's see if we can become heating up here. So we're heating up now. You can see with these bars here. So if I press Fire Blast, I am now in a hot streak, and then I can consume that hot streak with Pyroblast for an instant cast Pyroblast. So if I'm not in a hot streak, Pyroblast has this really long cast time. It's kind of hard to get off. We also have a talent here called Meteor, which is going to put this green circle on your cursor, and a giant fireball is going to come out of the air. It's going to smack all these targets here. It's going to put Ignite on them, and it's going to leave a lingering dot ground effect as well. For mobs standing in it, they're going to take that taking fire damage. Then next we have Dragon's Breath here, which is going to be that AoE sort of interrupt, sort of stun. We take a talent here called Alexstrasza's Fury, which is going to guarantee a critical strike out of it. And then we also have Phoenix Flames here. Let's find it really quick. Phoenix Flames hurls a Phoenix at the target. You have 3 charges of this, and this will always deal a critical strike due to Alexstrasza's Fury. So just to show you what these two abilities look like, we'll do Dragon's Breath first. That's going to be sort of an AoE disorient. So really good for mob control. And then you have Phoenix Flames. So it does an AoE effect here as well. Again, this is really good for when you're heating up. You can kind of pair this with Fire Blast when needed. So this is going to give you 3, 6, 7 chances to turn a heating up into a hot streak. So in terms of your rotation, you're going to kind of have 2 sequences. You're going to have out of combustion and in combustion. So your priority of your rotation will kind of change depending on which phase that you are actually in. So the main thing in your single target rotation is you want to get as many hot streaks as possible within that 12-second window. So this is kind of where you're using everything you have in your kit that you possibly use to get those hot streak procs. One thing to note here is we do have this Fire Starter talent. So your Firebolt and Power Blast spells always deal a critical strike when the target's above 90% health. So this is really good because it's going to get you started off on the right foot at the start of your pool. So you can Fireball into a Fire Blast for a guaranteed hot streak at the very start of the pool. So from here, what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to continue to build the Sun King's Blessing buff. So after consuming 8 hot streaks, your next non-instant Pyro Blast or Flame Strike cast within 30 seconds grants you Combustion. So it's going to grant you that Combustion window for 6 seconds after you consume 8 hot streaks. So the whole point of your rotation is to build this Sun King's Blessing buff up to 8 stacks as quickly as possible. So once you get to that 8 stacks of Sun King's Blessing, this actually stacks with your normal Combustion. So normally Combust lasts 12 seconds, but when you get to 8 stacks of this and consume them, right? So this procs, so you get 6 seconds of Combustion, then you actually press your Combustion ability for 12 additional seconds. Now you're at 18 seconds within Combustion. So this is really strong. So the start of your opener is always going to be building up these 8 stacks of Sun King's Blessing for that 18-second combust window. All right, so now we're going to talk about, right, the most efficient way to get to Sun King's Blessing to get the most damage out of those 8 hot streak procs. What do? You're going to be using Fire Starter because the boss is still above 90% health. So what you're going to want to do is Power Blast will always be a guaranteed critical strike when the boss is above 90% health. So you're going to be using Power Blast to build up those 8 stacks of Sun King's Blessing here. So what's going to look like is you're going to Power Blast, Fire Blast. Again, you can cast Fire Blast while you're casting another spell. So Power Blast, Fire Blast, instant hot streak. You're going to Power Blast again. You're going to Fire Blast. You're going to Pyro Blast. You can see here we're at 2 stacks already. Fire Blast, Pyro Blast, Fire Blast, Pyro Blast. Now here is optional. If Fire Blast is on cooldown, you can Phoenix Flames, Pyro Blast, Fire Blast, Pyro Blast. You can see we're at 6 stacks here. 7. And now we're at 8 stacks. So from here, all right, so here we are. For 30 seconds, I have to talk about this. For you, the Sun King, your next non-instant Pyro Blast or Flame Strike will grant you Combustion. So this means from here, you have to actually hard cast Pyro Blast to proc that Combustion, and then you can combust on top of that for an extended combustion time. One thing to note here, my combustion time there was actually not extended. The reason for that is you have to press Combustion before that last Pyro Blast goes off, or it's not going to extend it to 18 seconds. So make sure you're doing that in your rotation. That hardcast Pyro Blast is going off. The second it goes off, you want to combust before it hits the target. And you can actually combust while you are casting Pyro Blast, so you really want to combust just a second before that Pyro Blast goes off. So once you're actually in your combustion window, you just want to rotate the exact same way as we were just doing between Fire Blast and Pyro Blast. If Fire Blast is on cooldown, then of course you can go into Phoenix Flames or something like that to get those additional hot streak procs. Then at the end of your combustion window, you want to use Shifting Power, which will reduce the cooldown of your combust by an additional 12 seconds. All right, let's take a quick look at the opening rotation here. So one thing to remember is before the hardcast of Power Blast goes off, you want to combust when you're at 8 stacks of Sun King's Blessing, right? So we're going to start a rotation here with a hardcast Pyroblast into a Fire Blast. And all we're trying to do here is we're just trying to build up to 8 stacks of Sun King's Blessing. Okay, so we have the Fury of the Sun King now. So this lasts for 30 seconds. So your next non-instant Pyroblast. So we're going to hard cast and we're going to make sure to combust before it goes off. And as you can see here, we got the extended combustion, and we're just going to continue here rotating between Fire Blast, Pyroblast, and Phoenix Flames here. And then after we're out of combust, then we are going to shifting power for increased cooldown on combustion. You can see after all of that, we've basically got an entire minute off of our combustion here. All right, now for the AoE rotation, it's going to look the exact same as it did for the single target. The only real difference that you're going to see here is we're going to be bringing in a Meteor to the equation and Flame Strike. And Flame Strike is going to be replacing Pyroblast in this case. So it's going to be pretty much the same thing, right? We're going to start with a hard casted Flame Strike, and then we're just going to be going back and forth between Flame Strike, Fire Blast, Flame Strike, Phoenix Flames, Flame Strike, Dragon's Breath. You're going to be continuing that rotation until we get to 8 stacks of Sun King's Blessing. Once again, in the middle of that hard cast Flame Strike, we're going to combust, and then we're going to get that extended combustion window. One thing that will change though is inside of the combustion window, we will be using Meteor here, so that Meteor gets that crit benefit of combustion. And then one thing to note here as well, you're not going to be getting a whole bunch of instant cast Flame Strikes. And the reason for this is due to how Feel the Fireworks. So Flame Strike has a chance equal to 100% of your spell critical strike to build up to a hot streak. So what you're going to want to be doing is you're going to want to be fishing for hot streak procs, but they're going to be a lot harder to get for AoE. So what you want to do is, since it can only build up to a hot streak, it cannot build up to heating up. You're going to want to open with like a Fire Blast. So you want to Fire Blast, and then you want to starts the heating up process, and then you want to Flame Strike, because Flame Strike has a chance to build into a hot streak, but not into heating up. So just to show this again, we're heating up. Now we cast Flame Strike, and we hope we get a hot streak proc. Unfortunately, there we didn't, so we cast it again. We go back into Flame Strike. Once again, we didn't get it. But every time you're casting Flame Strike, just ensure that you are heating up before you cast Flame Strike, or you will never get a hot streak proc. But simply, your rotation is going to be, like we just said, Fire Blast into Flame Strike, Phoenix Flames into Flame Strike, Dragon's Breath into Flame Strike, going for those hot streak procs. We, of course, have our combustion window, and you want to typically try to Meteor inside of a combustion window so that it benefits from a mastery and crit strike chance. So let's take a look at how this rotation is going to work. So to start the rotation, you're going to open here with Phoenix Flames. That's going to get you into heating up. You are going to hard cast Flame Strike here, and then halfway through Flame Strike, you will combust. And then while you are in your combust, you're just going to rotate between, of course, Phoenix Flames and Flame Strike, Fire Blast, Flame Strike, to get as many instant cast Flame Strikes as you possibly can. And you're also going to Meteor within it. All right, so here we are at 7 stacks. I'm going to Flame Strike here. That's going to give our Fury of the Sun King proc. And then what we're going to do from here on is we're going to hard cast a Flame Strike, and we're going to combust before Flame Strike actually goes off. And then we want to Meteor inside of this. And then from here, we can just Flame Strike in between Fire Blast, and we can continue those chained instant flame strikes. And then once your combust phase is over with, then you want a shifting power to get extra CDR on your combustion. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and we will see you all in the next one.